do believe we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I'm your humble host, Lev Polyakov, at LevPo on Twitter, and we are here today with Daniele Bolelli, Ben, and Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, and Amanda Milius for the very first time. I've been wanting to get Amanda on for a very long time, so happy we finally got to make this happen. Daniele, you are a man of true knowledge, the drunken taoist. You have a wonderful podcast called History on Fire, which I highly recommend for all the Dan Carlin fans out there, for all the history buffs, and Conan buffs. Highly recommend you check it out. As you could tell of the poster behind Daniele, Amanda, what is that poster there?
Now that one is actually this guy Ikkyu Sojun. He was this Zen monk from the 1400s. He's drinking wine that's falling off the body of this lady, and his main passions in life, in no particular order, were Zen, women, and alcohol. And I love that guy.
Very almost like a pre-Frazetta.
Yeah, exactly. Has that vibe.
Yeah.
And Amanda, you are a film producer, director. You've worked in film pretty much your entire life, starting from, as I recently found out, Flynn Publications, of all places, but not in their...
Oh, yeah, that's right. I talked about that. I always do that, where I think I'm having just like a conversation with someone, and then I'm like, everything I'm saying is public. Yes. Yeah. But I'll remind you that Flynn Publications, when I worked there, is a giant building on Wilshire that had every magazine from Martha Stewart Living to some unmentionables to I think it was like Architectural Digest. I don't know, like architecture magazines, and like Flynn bought everything. So there was a lot of magazines production going on that was not necessarily just not conservative. I don't know how else to put it.
No, but
every time I laugh, I'm going to sound coughing like that tonight. It's going to be terrible. I just have to warn you for the rest of the night. I'm going to live, but that's what it's going to sound like.
No problem at all, Amanda. But the reason why I mentioned Flynn in particular is because I think a lot of people online have this idea that people are supposed to be like these picture perfect, only associate with the right kind of people, individuals. And what I found on the internet...
My dad got me that job. I mean, that's the funniest thing. Everybody thinks my dad got me all my jobs. That's the only job my dad ever got me. Ever. Like, I was like, could I like work in the film industry? And he was like, well, you can work in production. And like your choice was like, I don't know, like reenactments on the History Channel or like work for Mr. Flynn and Larry Flint. Yes. And I just picked that. It had more different material. I was not in any compromising places, but but that was the only thing. And so I say that just usually to like come back at people when they're like, oh, well, she only got her job in the Trump administration because of her dad. And I'm like, my dad doesn't know Trump. Like they don't like all like Republican, like big men don't all just like hang out together. He does know the boys, the Trump kids, but that's just from hunting and shooting, sporting clays, stuff like that. They're a member of the same club in New York, and I used to shoot there a lot. But there was no like this idea that someone's gonna pick up the phone and be like, oh hey, John Milius' daughter wants to work at the State Department, and that's gonna work like that. It just doesn't make any sense. But I don't care. This new like insult that's going around these days of like the Nepo baby is my favorite thing, because what are you supposed to say? Like, oh, I'm so sorry that my parents like had like pretty great careers and like their work impacted a lot of people and people really like them, and I was lucky to be raised by like geniuses, and on my mom's side like a model actress. Like, oh no, I like how insulting to me. Like, what am I supposed to say?
Well,
Like,
just a quick recap for those who do not know. Your father is the great and powerful John Milius, director of Conan the Barbarian, which I saw yesterday,
and
1080p.
writer.
Yes,
Actually,
writer.
we
Yes.
have the actually, I have a little bit of a prop. I don't know if you guys have gotten
Wow.
this, but it's a giant coffee table book. It's huge. I don't know the author. We didn't talk to him, which is very normal these days because my dad's archive is at the USC collection. So anyone who wants to write a book or whatever about his work can go access that library. But yeah, it's a very cool purchase if you're into Conan stuff, if you're into Frazetta, if you're into I think that we're going to talk about Ron Cobb's early drawings. This book is really good. Like I didn't know anything about it, and I just took a chance and got it. And I mean, it is everything you would want out of a Conan book. And from what I can tell, it doesn't buy into the one thing that tends to be a little bit of a back and forth. I'm very good friends with Sean Stone, Oliver, and his dad. Is a fan of the movie, which is great. And him and my dad, Oliver Stone and my dad have been friends for years, and in a weird way, right? Because they think they're politically opposite. They don't know that the horseshoe has come together. But so Sean and I know that, like, we're like, close to the same age, so we're just like, yeah, we agree on pretty much everything. Like politically, we're just like, yeah, we're all screwed. Like we know. But there is one little point of difference, which is that occasionally on shows and whatnot, people claim that Oliver Stone co-wrote Conan the Barbarian. I mean, you can just buy the script, okay, that like you can download it on the internet that my dad wrote, and then you can watch the movie and you can see that they match up identically. And I will tell you that it's not. Does it seem like an Oliver Stone movie, or does it seem like a John Milius movie? That's all I'm going to say. Like, just to clear that up. But
throughout this conversation, I definitely want to talk about, first off, Conan, but then I also want to see how exactly Conan relates to what's going on right now in the real world, because you were mentioning the horseshoe theory. I see that as both kind of a plus and a minus as far as, how extreme is too extreme as far as not getting rid of things that actually work. But before we get to that, I want to ask Daniele, how did you get inspired by Conan the Barbarian?
I have a good story for you. So my first Conan experience was when Conan came out. I was 8 years old. So in Italy, the laws regarding movie making are very different. Like in US, if your parents take you, you can go to a movie that's like PG-13 and they are 8 years old, and they let you go if your parents say yes. In Italy, was an absolute no, right? If they only had two age limit. It was 14 years old and 18. So if you are under 14, they're just, your parents can sign whatever they want, can show up with you. Nobody gives a crap. You still can't go in. So my dad was like, shit, what are we gonna do? So we went anyway. And then we got there, and he just pulled off the best acting job ever. He went to the guy at the front and was like, but what do you mean we can go in? It wasn't written in the newspapers, and we came from so far, and da-da-da. And the guy's like, no, it was written in the newspaper. No, but he went out of this whole drama thing. And the guy at the front was like, you know what? Just go in. And so my dad is there ready to pay him, and he's like, nope, can't do that, because if you pay me, then it means I saw you guys and I let you in, and now I'll get in trouble. So I did not see you. I was turned the other way, and you guys walked in. So that was my 8-year-old experience of going to watch Conan. And yes, I never had a chance after that. My life was permanently marked at that point.
What would you say was the scene that permanently marked out of all the scenes in the movie for you?
Honestly, the whole thing. I mean, the entire thing I've loved to death. The way the way Amanda's father wrote the thing is fantastic. Like, I find the screenplay. Like, I later read all Robert E. Howard, and I love him to that. I think he's a brilliant writer. And of course, people are always bitching about, oh, it's not exactly a Robert. It's like, it's never exactly anything. You know, when you change a medium, it inevitably becomes something else. That is Milius Conan. That's not Robert E. Howard Conan, and it's not supposed to be. And to me, it's like, whereas everyone else who tried to tackle Conan that did fairly awful things with it, both in literature and in movies.
And cartoons. Don't forget the cartoons.
Yeah, the whole thing. The way Milius was the only guy who, other than Robert E. Howard, did something fantastic with the character, you know, and I just love the whole. And one thing that I love too, beside the obvious, which is the substance of the movie, I really found it having one of the best soundtracks ever recorded.
Oh my God.
That soundtrack is just, I could listen to it every day of my life and never get tired. You know,
we have a good story about the soundtrack, actually. I'm sure you already know that Basil Polidorus was my dad's best friend in film school at USC. And he was actually studying to be a director. He wasn't at the music school. He was at the same school that I went to, which is the producing and directing school. He was hanging out with the same guys, you know, George Lucas, Randall Kleiser, all those guys, same, you know, Spielberg, Coppola, same group of guys, right? But he ended up becoming the just a music, you know, a composer and a musical genius. And he and my dad were like this. Like, I think they had such a close relationship. It was the most upset I have seen my dad at. You know, his friends are older. My dad is like in his 80s. He's like, I always have to explain to people, the child of a third marriage in Hollywood. So like my dad is as old as like most people's grandparents.
He's 79. He's 79, right? Your dad.
Sure, if that's what it says.
That's what it says there. The reason why I'm saying it is because I wanted to look up his birthday to see if it's possible, and it is possible that he is the reincarnation of Robert E. Howard, because Robert E. Howard died in 1936, and your father, it says, was born in 44.
Well, let's go with that.
Yeah. To be fair, the Jews believe in Gilgul, so they believe in reincarnation. So
he'll tell you he's the reincarnation of Alexander the Great, though. So I don't know if
that works. Given the several lifetimes, definitely, yeah.
He will tell you that, which makes no sense at all. But I mean, a little bit. I mean, our last name is found all over the Roman Empire. But the Roman Empire, not the Greek Empire. So anyways, you don't question some of the stuff he says. Like, it's just like, you're like, okay, like, you know, this week we're descendants of Alexander the Great, and really we're German and we're Bavarian on all, like, okay, maybe that, I guess, whatever. But anyway, the story with about Basil Polidorus and the soundtrack. Okay, so my dad had a stroke probably like 10 or 15 years ago, like quite a while back. And my brothers and I had to sneak into the hospital because, again, Hollywood marriages. The wife he had at the time had told the hospital, even though she wasn't there, not to let his children in. And so, or it was like one of my brothers was allowed, but then the other brother and myself were like on the like no list. So I had to pretend to be my own brother's girlfriend to go to see my dad in the hospital. And the nurses were like, so eventually I was like, hi, Dad. Like, I was like talking to him, you know, trying to like, because if someone has a stroke, you want them to have the memories, you know, return as quickly as possible because it has a higher chance of their recovery. And so I'm talking to him and the nurses are like giving me a bad look. And I'm like, lady, really? Like, I'm here and the wife, haven't seen her. So like, who do you think cares about him more? Like, get out of my face. Anyway, so they were like, okay, well, again, it was like, we didn't see you. Okay, fine. Don't sign the paper. Like, we didn't see you. And I'm just like, I have to sneak in, like, to see my own. Anyway,
like Daniela
so we see him. Yeah, right. So we sneak in, we're hanging out with him, and my brother Ethan starts playing the soundtrack to Conan because that's his favorite soundtrack. That and Big Wednesday, which are both Basil Polidorus. And he starts playing Conan, and it absolutely registers to my dad because they said when you're you're coming out of a stroke right after the first few hours, like a lot of times music is more effective than trying to talk to somebody. So we played the Conan soundtrack for him. It was like the scene when they're trying to, Sandal's trying to revive him with the sorcery
spirits,
and all
red,
the stuff. Like we're like, come on, Conan.
Yeah.
Spirits, yeah. I'm like, come on, dude, you can do it. And luckily he came back and was very he still has trouble with his speech, but I can carry on a conversation with him like all day long. Like I was just in California, probably why I'm a week or so in California, and I just hung out with him for a while. So that was fun. And he was, in good spirits and, talking about the news and wants to know everything. He's very politically obsessed these days. So.
Well, I do want to get to the politics part of it
anyway,
too. As
that
far
was
as
our Polidorus story. But yeah, they were very.
I think there's a bit of a lag that's been going on right now with the connection. I think everybody's able to hear each other right now, though. So there was a bit of a lag, but I think we're back. So I want to also take this conversation to you personally, as far as your inspirations being in politics right now, how you were inspired by, let's say, more of this Conan mindset as far as not having any of these obstacles get in your way, as far as being somebody who, as you said, was hated. And the point that your dad made was that it's important for somebody to be hated because it's something that actually makes you grow stronger as a person.
I mean, yeah, that's the number one thing I tell people that he taught me, which is when I was like 13, I was complaining about high school and I didn't, or whatever, I don't know, junior high, whatever you are when you're 13. And I didn't like anything about it. And I was very upset that I had to go to school with these people who were the children of the people that he hated, right? They're the children of the executives and the agents. I mean, really the big power agents in LA. Like they sent me to private school with these people. I don't know why. I think it was my mom's idea. I mean, granted, you can't send your kids to public school in Los Angeles because it's just totally destroyed at this point. But so I go to this high school and I don't get along with any of these people because, I mean, you can't even imagine the depths of insanity that I saw in high school. Like every girl gets a nose job when they're 15 years old, 16 years old. They all have eating disorders. They're all crazy. They're all trying to become actresses. They're all like, I wanted nothing to do with any of it. Like, I just was like, I'll just, do old school bad kid things, like sneak out at night and go to parties at rock and roll shows, like, on the wrong side of town or something like that. Like, I'll, maybe borrow my parents' car when I'm not supposed to, or things like that. Like I was not that kind of kid. So I did not get along with these people. I wasn't trying to have like the most fashionable bag. I was like a kid. I was causing trouble. So my dad and I were talking and I was like, why are you sending me to school with these people? You don't even like their parents. Like, I was like, all you do is complain to the press all day long about how you want to like blow up Jeffrey Katzenberg's car. And then you send me to school with these people and their children. Like, why? Obviously I don't get along with them. Like, why do I have to do this? And he's like, well, it's very important. Actually, he's like, I went to high school in Beverly Hills as well. Remember, my dad grew up like on my mom's street. Like we are from the neighborhood. Like it's very strange. So my dad gets sent to a boarding school for, bad kids and children that will do well in the outdoors. So anyways, they end up sending me to that school. I don't get along there either because I don't want to be in the outdoors. And they do all this stuff where, where they pick you up and they make you go find your way in the middle of the woods. And I was like, would refuse to do it. And I kept running anyways, whole thing. It's actually odd how many times I've gone to the same school as my dad. But anyway, so when I'm at this preppy school, he tells me it's good for you to learn that you need to enjoy that they don't like you, and you need to make them dislike you more. And then you need to get to the point where you don't care if you're the most hated person in the room, even by the professors, like the teachers. Like if you don't agree with them, you should argue with them all the time. And if you can start to learn to enjoy that feeling, then you can do anything you want in your life. Because the most important thing in the world is to not be afraid to be the most hated person in the room. I learned that. I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I just started playing with it. I just started like making it a game, when I went to school. I mean, I think I made it a little bit too much of a game, maybe a little. But I took that with me everywhere. And then I find it so hard to deal with people who don't behave that way. So when I was at State Department, for the Trump administration, of course, I was like, I loved it. I was like, cool Iran deal. Like, guess what's going to happen to that? Like, yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like, we're not like anything controversial. I was like very happy to be like at the head of, or like have anything to do with, because I didn't care if they hated me. I don't care about these people. I'm here to do a policy. I'm not here to make friends. And everybody, I swear, like a lot of the other appointees, they'd be like, well, I mean, the secretary, I'll just tell you, Mike Pompeo did not want to be disliked by that building. That's a no-no for me. Like if I could redesign an administration in my own design, the secretary would have to have absolutely no concern whether or not they upset the building. This was something I was tweeting about the other day. Of course, they refer to it always as like, well, we can't upset the building, because it's not like one person. It's like this ghost ship blob of U.S. foreign policy and particularly diplomacy, which is just this dead ghost ship that nobody knows what it's doing. It has no goal. It's just floating around spending money. It's just a disaster. And the fact that we didn't have enough people who were willing to just be like, nah, I don't really care what you think. We're not doing that. Or we are doing X or Y or whatever. Like, it's very important in politics to not care what anybody thinks. And that's rare, because you think of politicians, you think of people who like very much care what everybody thinks. Like they never want to make a misstep.
Because they need patrons. They need to be indebted to somebody in order to get ahead somewhere.
We can't have that anymore. We can't have that anymore. You either have the love of the people. I mean, we're in a very Roman, speak about my dad's work, Rome, which was maybe my second favorite thing. We're in a very Roman time where you have the love of the people or the love of the elite. And we need the love of the people. I don't care about the elite. I mean, you see what happens.
But in the way I see, that's what could attract you to somebody. You don't want to be Mr. Armchair Psychologist over here, but I see a real similarity, let's say, between Donald Trump and yourself, as far as somebody who is, you could say, energized more by the hatred that he gets than by the love that he gets, and that ends up making him way more popular. Like, I bet if it wasn't for the mugshot right now, if it wasn't for the attention that they would have been paying to him, I think he would have been kind of forgotten right now. And I do remember there was this gap of time where, they wheeled out some golden statue of him, of Trump with a magic wand. And, nobody really paid that much attention. I don't know. It was there, then it went away, but it wasn't in the air.
Stuff. I love it, dude. I love it, because you know what? I love chaos. And I love eccentricity, and Trump has it all. And I love his boldness. And you're right. I love the fact that he doesn't care that anybody hates him, because he knows that more people love him. And you know what? It might be really close to a dad thing. And I've said this on other podcasts, because people will be like, well, how do you square the fact that he's done things that you don't agree with? Because there are some things that I'm not happy about. Like, I don't like the Secretary of State I had to work for. I don't like a lot of the secretaries in that cabinet. I don't like the vice president and anybody that worked in his office. I don't like that we didn't complete the wall. I don't like that certain pardons were not signed. There's a the personnel office wasn't changed correctly until the final year. Okay. Like, I was already gone by then. I had to battle it out with like the Katja Bullock team. So there's plenty that I had a problem with, but I still support him. And you could say I learned that kind of, you can have two thoughts at the same time, from my dad, which is that, like, okay, he's not the greatest, like, traditional dad in the world. He's not going to come to your softball game. He's not going to come to your dance recital. Sometimes he's totally going to forget to pick you up from school. Sometimes he's going to send his assistant with his ID to pick you up from juvenile hall. Sometimes he's going to do crazy ass shit, like give you a bunch of like explosives to play with your brothers so that you get out of his hair while he's busy writing something. I don't care. Like, my brothers took a lot longer to come, around to being like, okay, it's dad. He's going to behave like this. Some of the stuff he does is going to be kind of crazy. My one brother's got to realize you can't bring your kids over to his house because there's guns like everywhere. And like, I don't know if they're loaded. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just stuff. Who knows what's in his house? We've had to battle it out with a lot of really crappy ex-wives and a couple of really bad girlfriends and, very Hollywoodish stuff. And we've had to deal with a lot of stuff that a lot of families would like wash their hands of someone. There's been financial issues that have happened because of his sort of, he grew up, like, honestly, he'll tell you he was a mountain man. He was a mountain man in Bel Air. Like sure. Okay. Like, I mean, there's a lot of exaggeration going on. You can never get the truth. You ask them, how did this happen? You never know what is actually real, what is not, whatever. How lucky am I, though? It's like, I'm raised by a genius. It's very exciting. He did really fun things. He's a very entertaining, incredible storyteller. I learned things from him that I could never learn anywhere else. Why am I'm going to be anybody, if they're still whining about their parents and they're not 20 years old, it's like, just no, like, you got to just get over it. So I think my ability to be like, okay, yes, dad made some decisions that were not so good for the family. He made some pretty bad decisions here and there.
I guess the difference is that the difference that dad making bad decisions only affects the family. Trump or another president making bad decisions ends up affecting a lot more. So the question here, whether or not you like Trump, hate Trump, what I'm getting to, though, is more of this idea that you talked about before of choosing between the elites and the people. And when there's no filter between you and the people, like when you sidestep any kind of system in order to go right to the people, the question is, does it not become a loop? Does it not become, in a way, a wheel of pain that now the Conans of the world have to wheel themselves around as we get ourselves to the point where, like, kind of what the opposite of my stream is? Because the reason why I brought you together with Daniele here is because I know you guys are very different points of view when it comes to Trump, when it comes to, I'd say, some like nationalism, even though I bet that you guys could agree on a whole lot when it comes to like the bare essentials of what exactly are we living for, what kind of... what kind of conditions we want our families to live on and so forth. But the thing that kind of gets to me is when we're talking about harnessing this Conan-like mindset, not for the individual, but for the collective. What exactly would a America being made great again look like for you, and how exactly do you define great? And I think that could be like a good point to start off from, but then also I would love to get in fact, let's actually start from Daniele over here. So Daniele, when you hear the phrase America, make America great again, let's take away like some of like the obvious canards, which, talk about like racist, KKK, yada yada, that's like a dead horse. I want to talk much more as far as actual like you could say, dangerous or troublesome things having to do with just like the actual policy of having somebody who sidesteps the elites and goes right to the people in order to make improvements, because that's the kind of energy that yes.
Well, wait, how does racism and
No, that's the point. That's not, those are dead horses. Those are things that the left, has been trudging out as far as, Trump, go away, racist KKK. No, let's take away all that. That's boring.
Yeah.
That's boring stuff. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's not one of these.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not one of those things where, like people, especially like, like the Stephen Colberts of the world, they love trudging out all these dead, tired arguments. And I'm not all about that, because I definitely understand that when it comes to border control, when it comes to having a high trust society, all these things are very important. The question is, though, when you have somebody who's in charge who is able to sidestep certain institutions, what are certain troublesome things that end up happening there? That's the deeper conversation, rather than all of this cotton candy that the late night talk show hosts talk about. So Daniele, I know if you have any thoughts related to like that kind of management of power over here, and whether we're talking about somebody like Trump or somebody else who would be more of a populist nationalist figure, what kind of worries you when it comes to that?
I guess I'm in a elite spot because I don't like the elites. I don't like the people either. I don't like any large group of people on any level. It's like on an individual level, I can get along for pretty much any human being on earth. But on a group level, I don't like any of them. I don't like one group. I don't like the opposite. I don't like a nation. I don't like an organized religion. I don't like... To me, it's like I do find, and if anything, in the whole Conan thing, what's fantastic is talk about an individualistic movie. There's like, it's all about the individual transcending all the bullshit surrounding it, right? I don't think it's a chance that the bad guys in the movie are essentially a religious cult. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is. And that's where people are desperately sacrificing individuality in the name of buying into some identity, some collective identity. I'm allergic to all collective identities, including the ones that on the surface I'll be like, that's actually not that bad. I still feel that the trade-off when there's any kind of collective identity is dangerous, and it can go to unhealthy places. So I think I'm a bad candidate for anything that requires me to think on an organized level, whether political or religious or anything, which inevitably requires organization. Because, it's like in tribal societies, in a small-scale society where we are a face-to-face community, we can talk to each other, look each other in the eyes, and make decisions in that fashion. And, there's something exchange in that direct communication that can get us places. Anytime you're talking about mass numbers of people, it doesn't work that way anymore. And now you have to work through organization. Now you have to work through groups. Now you have to work through representatives. And to me, the problem is that, of course, some people are going to be better than others. Some philosophies are going to be better than others. I'm not trying to say they're all the same. But I do feel that the potential for good things to emerge after going through all those filters is severely limited, to say the least. So that's, I think, and granted, what I'm saying right now, it's sort of a cynical viewpoint, because it's like, well, okay, that's sure, maybe you're right, who cares? But the point is, what do we do next? Because you cannot just be like, oh, screw it all sucks. That's not, you don't build anything based on that. And I get it, so I'm taking a very easy way out in that fashion. I do feel, though, that I think my mindset is what's the least crappy outcome we can come up with, more than I'm thinking there's something that I strongly believe in that's going to be beautiful that emerges from this. Because I don't think anything beautiful come out from any political movement or any mass religious organization or anything of that sort. Again, I find beauty in individuals. I rarely ever find beauty in mass movements.
Well, if we're trying to be weather forecasters here and talk about a mass populist movement where a lot of the gripes that the people, and I think a lot of them rightly so, have about what's going on in this country ends up bringing whether it's Trump or somebody else who's tapping into that kind of energy. What do you see as being the possible negative ramification, but is that negative ramification in a way even worth it? Like, is that the least crappy of all things that could happen when the other side is even worse, or is it?
Right.
You know, like that's
Right.
kind of like what we're trying to figure out here, you know, seeing like the Biden admin and how old a lot of those people are. And like Amanda was talking about how you have like this blob where you don't even have Alan Dulles. Like I'm reading today David Talbot's The Devil's Chessboard, and I'm kind of digging this dude, you know, like he was an operator. Yeah.
One of my top books, I reread it frequently because I think it's really, there's a big change in our country that happened at that point. Very important book, very important book. But I'll let Daniele finish. But before while I'm interrupting, I gotta say, I just think he said something, you know, I don't find a disagreement there. I think he spoke beautifully about something that I absolutely agree with. I don't know that we disagree. I think, especially if you're going to talk about Conan as like an individualist movie over all of these collectivist ideas, it was just super well said. And that's how I view it. I think that's how my dad viewed it. And I remember I accidentally, I swear to God, I accidentally like repeated the plot with my thesis film because the whole point of my thesis film was about this individualist lifestyle versus that of the communal lifestyle. And I hadn't watched Conan in a really long time. And I'm editing the movie and I'm like, and like I realizing like the end, they're like this like hippie commune. And I'm like, holy shit, did I just accidentally make like girl Conan? He has like a gun instead of a sword. And I'm like, right. Oh my God, did I do this? Like, and I'm like, oh no.
Wait, was the hippie commune, was that the snake cult or
it wasn't a snake cult, but I am wearing all of my snake jewelry for you guys because I've had, because of Conan, there's actually multiple things in my life that have made me obsessed with snake jewelry. And I think it's actually very, symbolic, and it's not also, there's like 80 different reasons, like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton with Bulgari. There's Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality, but it all began when I was a kid watching Conan the Barbarian with the snake cult jewelry and the way that the diamonds and the things and the snake would hypnotize the women, and Arnold saying in the commentary, and of course already the women, they're hypnotized by the jewelry. I was like, yeah, it's true, it's true. But sorry, let you continue on the political bent. But I have to say, I think he spoke beautifully about that. I don't think I disagree at all. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. Deeply appreciated. Yeah, I think to me is. The whole collectivist thing, I think, is when it gets to, I think there are two different levels. You know, if we're talking about community at face-to-face community, those are things I strongly believe in. You know, a family, a small-scale tribe, something where you're talking about 20, 30, 50, 100, the number of people you can keep track to and know their life story and know what makes them, you know, that's a real community to me. And the lack of that is, I think, killing us in a lot of ways. You know, the fact that we have been moving away from that progressively more is at the roots of a ton of the problems that we deal with, from mental health to everything else.
Yes.
The problem is that in a society like ours, where we don't live in the small-scale community, we live in this larger, we have to make up communities that are a poor substitute for their very real human experience. You know, when you talk about whether it's a giant church or a nation or something, those are abstractions. You know, they are not real communities the same way as an extended family is, or an extended family of your choices. And that's where I feel that things, you know, we have to figure out, like I'm interested almost anthropologically in figuring out, can we design a society where we do have both the really small scale and extremely large scale? Because obviously some problems cannot be addressed just in your backyard or in your neighborhood. But I feel that we need both, because on a human level, you need the community. I think the fact that we are, mental health issues, suicide rates of antidepressant use is climbing like crazy is directly tied. It's not the only reason, of course, but it's directly tied to lack of community. And at the same time, figure out, okay, that's a real community. What else can we do on a larger scale? And in that regard, that's where I think the least we are ideologically driven, the better it is. Because to me, it's like the fact that I have to agree with somebody because they are on my same side, but on an issue where I think, no, you're a dumbass. How can you say something that's stupid? It's terrible. It's like, why are we playing this game? Like, I don't want to, I want to choose issue by issue. On each issue, figure out who are my allies on that particular issue. And on the next one, we may be completely at odds, and that's fine. But, getting to make choices on a case-by-case scenario as opposed to, oh, you have a certain stance on global warming, so I have to agree with your stance on abortion, and I have to agree with your stance. It's like, those are totally different things. But of course, the way any system is built on creating coalitions, is built on creating, and of course, having some vaguely consistent ideology helps to build an identity, to build a coalition and all that stuff. I see why it's convenient. I also see how it's horrendously damaging to get any good decisions being made.
Well, there's two things you were talking about. Number one, there is making some, let's say, laws or doing some kind of programs, whatever, that could potentially help the situation. Probably not. I think it does come down to individuals trying to figure out. Maybe it comes down to religion, things of that nature. But the second thing, which I think is even more important, is are there certain things that also need to be gotten rid of as opposed to added into the equation? So I guess the analogy I would use is some people, I wouldn't say I'm one of them, at least not right now, but some people would make the analogy of there being some crazy dude who's high on bath salts who's running right at you. And the question is, do you have time to negotiate? Do you have time to do anything other than to defend yourself from this crazy dude on bath salts? And that's, I think, the position that a lot of people feel they're in right now. The only problem is that people have felt that way in Weimar Germany. People have felt that way in other parts of the world where they thought, you know what, it's either do or die right now, and if we don't get this person in and get rid of so-and-so, then it's going to be an existential crisis for our entire world here. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Are we in the system right now, Amanda, you think, where, at least in the United States, we've got certain things that are in the mode of being existential, like an existential crisis, things that makes you think, like, okay, like bipartisanly. I'm not talking about looking at something where you have to like sit with Daniele and myself for like a week and like go through, all these different ideas and theories. I'm talking about like the clearest cut bipartisan stuff. What would you say, if there are any examples that you can give, of things that would make us think that, okay, this is like an incredibly dire situation and this has to be gotten rid of and this has to be gotten rid of and this is how we do it?
Well, I gotta say, I'm very in line. Daniele's almost got this, I gotta say, somewhat European look at this, and you're not wrong. And it's something that I think Americans have secretly yearned for a long time, which is the ability to not have to be on this side or this side. The bipartisan, the two-party system in our country, I have argued now for whatever, as long as I've been in politics, which is not that long. It's like 6 years or something, ever since the Trump administration, has been the worst thing for the United States. It's a uniparty. It's not two parties. They want the same things. It's a game. It's just a distraction, and it's made to make us hate each other and then be distracted by the fact that everybody, at the top actually just gets what they want every time. And there are all of these different issues that are important to people's lives that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. As you say, why does my opinion on, because I'm such a dork that for fun, I am interested in foreign policy. Like, that's why I worked at State Department. I really like, foreign affairs, foreign policy. Why are my opinions on foreign policy I find this actually a lot where I live, when I meet people outside of politics, which thank God now most of my friends are not involved in politics. And they're like, oh, but I don't like Republicans, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, and they list all these domestic issues, fine. There are issues like gay rights and all this stuff that I'm like, I have more gay friends than you do. It's the only friends I have, actually. And it's like, so like, it's not to me, the thing is, I'm like, well, okay, it's not your parents' Republican Party anymore, because to me, I'm going to say the Democrat side has not gotten with the program. Whereas like, at least with the giant push of 2016 that was Trump, we got rid of so many of the old 1980s ideas of what a Republican was. And it really came down to focusing on getting rid of useless wars, which I thought was a Democrat idea, right? When I was growing up, that was considered a Kennedy Democrat idea. So that became our rallying cry. We were like the anti-war side of the Republican Party, which I think a lot of people didn't understand. And you know what? It's not exactly their fault that they didn't understand that, because it wasn't communicated very well. And it's one of the things I constantly go on about the right cannot communicate. It drives me insane because, of course, I grew up as an artist. I grew up in a family of artists, and I grew up basically going to communication school. I mean, film school is communication school. So it drives me crazy the way that they can't do that. It's very easy to communicate the ideas that we have that are good. Now, okay, so then you get some domestic issues that maybe I do have a difference with some of these people about, right? Like maybe on abortion, as you say, or some of these religious ideas, because I am a little bit more religious than your average person running around. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that that's true. The friends that I have out here have never worked in politics, and they're just as religious as I am. They just happen to be, Christians, or maybe some of them are Muslims, and some of them are like all different kinds of things. It's just that they have a very God-based way of living their life. And that's great. I'm fine with that. Like, to what Lev was saying, you got the bath salts guy coming at you. You don't have time to make a decision on all of these finer points. Yeah. And we don't have time to coalesce and make coalitions around these smaller ideas, which I wish we did, because I actually think that is correct. I think we all feel that way. I don't think I really feel like I haven't met anyone that doesn't feel that way. I'll just put it that way. I haven't met anyone who's like, I just go with the flow of whatever party I'm with because that's the party. And it's like everyone, even down to the few Democrat friends I have that'll still talk to me, we agree on like so many things that we're like, we should do a podcast. We should do something together. We agree on so many things, and I'm like, no, this is everybody. And what I'll say on we have the decision of like, I got to just go with my side because I have to draw a line in the sand. Okay. The line that I'm drawing in the sand is, for me, it's, do you believe in God? You're on my side in any way. That can be what I believe, that if you have a spiritually sound life and soul, that you are genuinely going to be a better person than if you don't, than if you believe that there is nothing. I don't condemn people who believe that there is nothing and know anything, but I would much rather be on the same side as someone who believes in something like the spirit of the universe or whatever it is. I'm Jewish. I believe in Old Testament God, so I take it really seriously. Like, that's some serious stuff. I was talking to some people on Twitter about tattoos the other day, and I was like, "But you go against the Old Testament if you want to." I was like, "Have you read it? It scares the living shit out of you."
But so many laws that have to be obeyed. There was like 600 or.
I'll tell you what else I won't do. I will not attempt to have sexual relations with anyone's slave before I offer to buy them. If that situation arises, I will not.
That seems like a solid principle,
right?
I'm
not getting any tattoos, and I'm not sleeping with anybody's slaves unless I first offer to purchase. whatever. I'm good. I'm just trying to stay on the good side of that as much as I can. But I don't know that I do that well. But the point is that like, I don't need everyone to have the same religion as me. I have most of my team, the people I work with, everybody's Catholic, evangelical, whatever. Like I said, my best friend and like Jewish, Muslim family with the, like it's all that is good. Okay. So one of my lines in the sand is, do you believe in God? And when I say God, do you have a spiritually healthy life? Okay. Like, do you believe in right and wrong, like across the board? So that's where you will find me on the other side of certain domestic issues like abortion and things like that, because that's just where I stand. Like at the same time, you know, it's not so much like, okay, I'm not going to get a tattoo because I'm told in my religion I am not getting a tattoo. Does that mean I'm not friends with people who have tattoos or something like that? I mean, it's just no, I don't.
No, but that's where you stand personally. But the question is, how would you be able to mandate something on the grander scale if we're talking about states or if we're talking about the federal government?
So let me get to what we're all the second. Okay, so there's one line there, which is the God line. The other line is, do you want to put my friends, my family, and myself in a gulag or not? If you don't, we're good. If you do, I have a problem with you. So that's where I get to the political side of it. So being Jewish, I suppose, and being a person who likes freedom, living my life, doing what I want to do when I want to do it, like smoking cigarettes outside the airport, and whatever, you know, like I have a very leave me alone attitude because I have an unusual life, and that's just sort of how I've grown up to be, is to be allowed to have an unusual life. So I would say that's the other line is I'm seeing a lot of people that want to put my friends, my family, and myself in a gulag, and I'm not. I got to draw the line there. I'm sorry, but like, if you're okay with the DOJ the way it is right now, and I'm even talking about the DOJ that was operating when my government, my president, whatever, was in office, it was just as bad. Okay. And it was a fault of ours to not deal with that. Obviously, you know, the movie I made is about Russiagate.
Plot against the president.
Plot against the president, very much about Russiagate and disproving it. And I don't know what Durham was doing for 4 years, because I finished that movie 4 years before he did, and he probably got paid a lot more than I did. I don't know what he was doing, but anyways, everything that was in his report is in the movie. So, but that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, okay, this isn't the country that we said we were living in. I was willing to play by the rules that I was taught when I was growing up. And I think we all were, right? Like, it was like, okay, America is a republic and it has representatives, and you vote for your representatives, and then they come to Washington, D.C. and they do this and they do that. And it's like a bipartisan thing. That's all bullshit. That's just total, complete bullshit. The people have absolutely no voice. The institutions are so corrupt. And this is what I would beg of Democrats. I would say, do you want to live in a world where they can do this? Because eventually Republicans will come back in power, and I don't know who they're going to be. I don't know that they're going to be fair. I don't know anything about what's going to happen in the future. Do you want a country where you can have people brought up on fake charges and have an entire country under the fake illusion that a president is a foreign asset when they're not, and have that completely destroy the gears of how these institutions work, from the State Department to DOD, absolutely putting our national security at risk. So much damage was done. Also, talk about polarizing the populace. You can't. Before 2016, you could have friends that were on the other side, and you just didn't talk about it, or you just didn't care. You talked about other things. You talked about like art, movies, whatever, like things that, like, you know, I don't know, just whatever you did with your life. Like, it wasn't the biggest point in everybody's day. Now everyone's a political expert. everyone's a foreign policy expert apparently too. Everybody's an expert on everything that happens. Like, I guess that's social media.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things that happened, but it's I am old enough to remember before 2016, and it wasn't like this. And being that the media is majority, absolutely. I don't know if you're going to disagree with me, but it is 110% controlled by the intel community, and it's 110% Democrat leaning. The media has done a terrible disservice to this country. If you look at foreign media, if you look at alternative media, if you look at whatever, they've made it so that we can't agree on what the truth is, which is very scary, because then you can convince people of anything. And you will never come to an agreement. You can find people, and you know when you start talking to them, where you're like, we're not going to agree, and there's no way, there's no getting around it. I could provide whatever evidence, they could do the same for me, and I'm like, you get that feeling, and you're like, it's sad, because you're like, we can't talk about this. We're not going to agree. That's my answer to your bath salts.
Well, there's one, the crazy bath salt guy. There is one thing that I would want to add to it before you and Daniele respond, which is, I would say the version of the bath salts guy that is even more relatable to that kind of do or die situation is what you would experience in Russia. And the reason why I would say is, I'm from Russia. I was born in St. Petersburg. My family has a lot of history there as far as the things that were going down back in the day. And in Russia, like you were talking about Trump and things that are going on, which, aren't great, but they are going on, you could say, between different mafias as opposed to going on to civilians. And I'm not saying this 100%, I'm just saying, like, the bigger picture that somebody would get when they're watching the news is, okay, this thing is happening to this politician, to that politician. In Russia, things that happen have to do with, like, for example, if you run a business and your business happens to be, kind of more or less successful, anybody who has connections to the government can go and take your business away. They can also go in and, have their way with your woman, even, do horrible things to you, and they're not going to get persecuted if they know the right people. There's no lawyers that are going to be able to help you out if you get right into the face of somebody who is that connected. And that is not something that I've experienced in America so far. So far, I've not experienced that.
How do you not see that in the United States? Today, there was a woman tweeting, I forget what her name is, so I won't open my phone. She tweets about Hunter Biden getting an indictment for having unregistered guns on crack. She writes, how many, I don't understand how many people have been federally charged for weapons infractions when they're dealing with substance abuse issues. And I was like, substance abuse issues? Now that is a hell of a way of putting buying guns on crack. Like, there's plenty of people in this country that I would say especially in the minority community, would tell you they don't get that kind of treatment when they buy guns on crack. That's not how the media phrases it. Like, there are special people that get
the one difference I would say is that woman, if she was writing that in Russia, she'd get arrested by the government and she'd get 7 years in jail for writing.
I'm saying she's on the same side as the government.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What you're describing to me is the situation that I see when the FBI raids Roger Stone, Trump for bullshit. Like, did you move a box in the thing? Like, the man's the president; he can declassify anything he wants. The various impeachments over the phone call when Hunter Biden is making actual deals with Ukraine, where they impeach the president over a phone call. Like, this is what I'm saying, is that I agree with you. I'm just saying that that's the side that I see getting the special Putin-esque, Putin and friends protection. I see that as the Democrats.
You're not going to get any, let's say, disagreement out of me when it comes to that. In fact, later on, I would love you to meet a friend of mine who's in Kiev right now, Vlad Davidson, whose name you can look up in the official Wikipedia of Hunter Biden. He thinks that Hunter Biden is an absolute degenerate piece of shit, filth, and he would definitely say that to your face. and at the same time, he is somebody who very much supports Ukraine. So the reason why I'm saying that is I think that within these conversations, there's a lot more nuance. I misphrased when I said it, because when you were talking about that lady, what I meant to say was that if she was talking about the other side of it, if she was criticizing Hunter Biden, if she was, let's say in your position, if you would write something negative against the government, then you would be thrown in a gulag in Russia, or like this guy who was helping this woman out who was protesting and getting beat up by the police. This old guy, like in his 50s, he helped the woman out, got into a gulag, became like a political prisoner, then got into another gulag. As soon as he was free, his back was broken by a guard, and he recently died at like 66 years old. So that's the example of things.
I'm really worried about that. Like,
yeah,
freaks me out. Like, I come from a long line of people who know when it's time to get the heck out.
Yes.
And I am having that spidey sense feeling. I don't feel very good about, like these Republicans that run around and they're like, but that's not constitutional. I'm not going to wave my pocket constitution. The feds come with the white van and the thing to put over my head and drive me away somewhere. I don't think it's going to save me. I think there's very few things that are going to save me. And I mean, we just saw, we've seen people, okay, whatever you think about January 6th, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I wasn't there. We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. But what I will say is you can't possibly tell me that some of these sentences, that any of these sentences are correct for the actions that these people were doing on that day if you compare them to the actions that were being done that summer by the BLM protests and all of the summer of fire. And I have to say, you have to take away maybe one, or some of us are more partial to the reasons of these protesters than another. You can't really look at that. You have to look at their actions, the damage, and what actually happened for the law to be applied equally, right? I mean, that was what America was built on. This is why I'm kind of at the bath salts moment that you described, is that when I started in DC, when I started in politics, I still believed that the Constitution was how we were run. I still believed that, like, the law eventually you can get to the right level of the law where it makes the right decision. I don't believe that anymore. And it was after 2020 that I don't believe that anymore, and I think that that's where I start to agree with Daniele on this very dark. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't want to bum out your audience, but I have a very black-pilled way of looking at things right now. And I see actually getting back down into these smaller communities and into, sorry, we have a guest.
Yoko the cat.
Everybody, there's no podcast I do that doesn't have Yoko, the neocon cat. Don't forget Yoko, neocon cat. When Nord Stream 2 happened, I was like, I know.
Her doing,
yeah.
Now,
the greatest to turn around and not put a butt in my face while I'm in the middle of a podcast. But
now there is one thing that I would quickly say, and then I definitely want to go to Daniele. One thing I would quickly say is kind of a retort. I always want to keep in mind for myself, and like we're all the same generation here. Old Daniele a little bit older and wiser, but I always want to assume that I was literally born yesterday, and we were born yesterday, and there were so many other things that have gone on in the history of the United States, going back to the 60s. I
assume that too. I tell people that all the time.
Like going back to the amount of rioting and bloodsheds and all this kind of stuff that was going on back then, which makes me think, like, even recently, like the 1990s Los Angeles riots that were going on, where they had to bring out the tanks and you had the roof Koreans. So it's like when
roof Koreans!
Yes, exactly. So when you have all of these things that have been going on, and when you can speak to somebody, like I know people who are close to me who say, like, yeah, of course, the CIA is going to be a bunch of killers, but you have to weigh everything with what else is going on in the world in order to actually see, like, okay, where exactly are we in relation to the gulags? Because there are examples, like I gave you, of Russia, where if you actually make a Facebook or whatever post, not Facebook, but whatever they use, and say something bad about the government, you're going to the gulags. That's the way that it works. So we already have like an example of a threshold that we got to reach. And the question is, where are we in relation to it? You say we're closer, but then when I take a look at history and take a look at the 60s and where we had like the USSR that was funding a lot of money into destroying the United States at that point. So my question is, like, are we really where we think we are when it comes to the gulags? And that's why I just want to look back in history and kind of reassess it. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I really want to figure out where exactly are we.
Play with that? Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. I'm just saying, like, it's the same thing as like the we used to be afraid of atomic bomb, hydrogen war. Like that used to be something that we were like, that the United States was like fearful of from like the 40s up to the 90s. That was a fear. And then all of a sudden it was like, nah, let's just get into it with Russia. Let's just go. And I'm like, whoa. Didn't we have an issue where we were like, maybe nuclear war is not like something we want? Like, it's the same kind of feeling I have when you talk about the gulags thing, where you're like, well, maybe we're not so close to the gulags. Like, again, as a Jew, I'm like, I don't really want to find out. Do we have to find out?
I think we do have to find out, not even for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of others. I really think that people who are not in tune with what's going on right now, we should actually just sit down and, I don't know, make a spreadsheet or whatever and say, okay, these are the things, these are the best case, the best cases I have for saying that the following has to be stopped. Whatever else we do, we must stop this, and this. So anyway, Daniele, what say you about this particular situation, like figuring out whether we're closer or further away from the gulags here?
I mean, one of the problems with that is that anytime, because the human mind is so black and white, anytime, everybody gets raised with whatever country you live in. Your country is the greatest country on earth, a symbol of everything that's good. And then when you find out that, oh, damn, there's this thing that happened and that thing that happened and that thing that happened. Oh, man, all this stuff is fucked up. It's not like what I was told. And then people flip the switch and then it's like, oh, then it's the worst country in the world. Every evil that ever happened, it's because of my government. And it's like, yeah, to a point, but no, to another, and it's more complicated. Because, if you're, in that sense, I agree with you that if you're saying like how... Is there a ton of horrendous stuff in US today? Is there a ton of horrendous stuff that the US government has been responsible for historically and right now? Yeah, 100%. Terrible. When you compare it to, communist China or the Soviet Union or something, you're like, okay, bad, but not quite there, And again, I agree with Amanda too, that is like quite there doesn't mean that then you pat yourself on the back and say, okay, we're not the absolute worst in the world. We don't kill everybody who say the wrong word every day. We only do it once in a while, then we should be okay. It's like, no, of course, that's not the idea. So I do get it that, yes, just because you're saying this is not the worst possible scenario ever, it doesn't mean that then, we should ignore it and everything is hunky-dory and it's fine. Both positions make perfect sense. And in that sense, again, I don't think you guys are saying different things. You're both right. They both make absolute sense in that regard. The question becomes, in a situation in which you don't trust any of the institutions because you feel that all the institutions involved to do something about it are hopelessly corrupt, how do you go about changing things? How do you go about, because again, things that happen within your arm's reach, in your family, in your neighborhood, those are a little easier to address because you do have agency, you do have some power to affect those things. When you talk about global things, or even just at the national level, they are so large that inevitably they go through the very like any change, most of the time, there are exceptions, of course, but most of the time, change would have to go through those institutions that are the very problem that we're trying to address. And that becomes that catch-22 where it's like, how do you go about solving that where the tools that normally are the ones considered that would be used to solve it are at the roots of the problem? And that's where, man, I wish I had the answer to that, because if I had the answer to that, I could fix a lot of things right now, but I don't. That's the realities. I can see the situation, I can analyze it. Doesn't mean I will know what
you don't
to do
have the
about it.
answer how, but do you have the answer what because we can't even agree on that for the most part when it comes to America. Because, like, we're talking about all these different institutions and all these different people, but as far as which are the specific people that are the closest to being able to throw us in the gulag, and what would be their justifications down the road. Because, like, Amanda, like, I agree with you, it could definitely happen.
DOJ and all of their...
Okay, so closest thing that I recall was there was that issue of the school boards when the angry parents were going to the school boards. The school board
during the congressional hearing, and then finally Matt Gaetz got the guy to say, "So were you or were you not writing down the license plate numbers of people who were in the parking lot?" And he was like, "I was on the job assigned to write down the license plate numbers of the people who are at the school board meetings." Yes, that's a great example.
And for those who are not aware of what exactly that was, we had these parents that were very angry about things related to COVID, things related to certain left-leaning things that were being taught in schools that they didn't approve of. Their kids being
sexual content being taught to children like 10 years old and younger.
Yeah, with strap-ons and things like that. Yeah.
Another thing, I feel like we all kind of agree here. It's like once they're 18 or whatever, like you can get tattoos, you can read dirty novels, you can do whatever. In fact, most kids probably get a hold of a Playboy when they were 16 back in 1950, whatever.
Wait, when they were 16? No, way younger than 16. But
whatever. I wasn't. This wasn't my world. But I'm just saying, clearly, it didn't destroy civilization to have kids be curious at a
Yeah. No, I saw Clockwork Orange when I was like super young.
Oh, we all did. My house was a disaster. Don't even get me started.
But it's like, just as a quick aside though, the fact that we saw things that were like good taste, like they were high quality cinema, I think that also has something to do with it. I know it's kind of not something that people think about when they talk about a lot of like the woke, critical, race theory, gender theory stuff, but I find a lot of it to be actually like tasteless as far as how the drawings are done, how the designs are. You know, like it's all like these weird blob people. You know what I mean? Like they don't have any sense of harmony. They don't have any sense of design.
The most thing I shouldn't have seen when I saw at a young age, because my parents were never home and there was videotapes everywhere, because we were a member of the academy. So every year they sent the boxes of videos or DVDs or whatever to the house. So when I was like really, really little, I saw, what's the very famous Sharon Stone?
The one with the legs?
Indecent Exposure.
No.
That one.
Are you going to arrest me for smoking?
Basic Instinct.
Basic Instinct.
So Basic Instinct was floating around my house, and so I was like, well, my parents watched this, so I'm checking this out. And I was like, okay, so that's how adults interact. Okay, so that's not so good. But like Daniele sneaking into Conan. I mean, I'd already seen all my dad's movies. Of course, like there's like plenty of sex and weird shit going on in those. I mean, I would say the taste thing actually is a very interesting point that I haven't heard brought up recently. But let me let you continue. Sorry.
Oh, just a quick other aside on the taste thing is that you could find a lot of people today from the more very online part of Twitter who are into art, illustration, things like that. They point out that there's like this Tumblrization that has gone on with art when it comes to all of these very, they're not drawn badly, like they know how to draw the human body, they know how to draw anatomy, but they look like these cookie cutter, SJW-ish designs that have just these absolutely sugary looking faces, and they kind of remind me of Soviet propaganda in a weird way. Like these. You know what I'm talking about, right, Amanda? Like that kind of design. And you see it today also with like the flat design, where whether you go to Google or Facebook or whatever, you see these blob-like creatures that don't resemble like any particular gender. It's not like, let's say like in the 1950s, where we had, for example, certain archetypes of like men, women. The women usually had like curves and they were cute and they were happy. And the guys looked like a little bit tougher. They had like eyebrow ridges. I think that there's a primal part of us that connects to a lot of these archetypes. Not to say that there aren't people who are more within the middle ground. We've always had people who can like go in between the two. But what made them special was exactly that they were special, that they were like the David Bowies, for example. Like,
I talk about this all the time. The Marianne Dietrich, David Bowie. If you can't tell, I talk about this with the Perfume Nationalist.
oh yeah,
Jack,
a regular guest of the show. He's been on several
he's
times.
one of my best friends, favorite people. But we talked a lot on a certain episode. I think it was like the 3rd season closer, about how, like, if you can't, you're lying if you're telling me you can't tell the difference between the gender bendy cool of a David Bowie or a Marlene Dietrich, or like even like something like The Crying Game, or like Helmut Newton with the cool, very powerful looking women in suits with smoking jackets and hats in the street, and like standing like very like powerful, blah, 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 whatever, like very gender bendy, but like arty and cool. Like, if you're telling me you can't tell the difference between that and like the freak show that's going on right now with like the woke, like, trans ideology that I just don't buy into at all. And I think the fact that they're like, the thing that's so crazy about it is that it's like, okay, so let's just say you like the rules as they were like in Florida and wherever were like, okay, well, you just can't talk about sex and things like that with kids that are under, 16, 18, whatever. Why is there such a pushback against that? Why are there cartoons, as you describe, almost in this like propaganda-ish way? Why are they being designed for children? Like, they didn't talk about sex in those terms when we were kids at all. Trans, not trans, gay, not whatever. It just wasn't how, nobody was getting that kind of education. That's just crazy. The fact that they're freaking out about it not being aimed towards kids is what makes it so incredibly off-putting and incredibly uniting amongst parents and anyone who remembers what things were like before 5 minutes ago.
And there also seems to be a kind of, and I want Daniele definitely respond, but just real quick, in the video games department, when it comes to certain things that people take as, well, this is just a matter of respect, as far as having all these different pronouns in a video game like this new one about outer space, the problem that ends up happening is if somebody decides to make a mod of that video game, getting rid of the pronouns, all of a sudden they're banned from this entire, the forum where they release the mod. And that's where kind of the control aspect comes in, where on one hand, sure, we want to be respectful, but if we're noticing that certain things, I guess kind of like with the school board scenario, certain things where let's decide on our own if we want to be respectful or if we want our kids to get certain content or not. And if then the government comes in, and if then the government, like in California right now, I heard they recently passed this new law that in divorce proceedings, there is going to be a consideration of whether or not one of the parents accepts the child's gender identity when it comes to who the child is going to be with.
Jordan Peterson was ahead of all of us on that. I mean, I got to say, like, I couldn't believe it came out of Canada, but Jordan Peterson was the first one that said that they're going to have laws. We never thought it would be anti-free speech laws in so much as what it is, which is you can't say something, but compelled speech is just as bad. So to compel me to say something that I don't agree with, and for me to have to say, to call a man dressed as a woman, and I'm not trying to be mean to somebody. I'm not trying to like go out of my way to be mean or something like that to someone in some certain situation. But there is a part of me that's like, I'm not gonna do that. Nope. I'm sorry, but I am a woman, and you can't just put a dress on and take some hormone pills and say that you are the same as me. That is not the same. It's not the same. Like, and so like, again, that might be maybe one of my lines in the sand that I didn't bring up before, is that I can't cross that line. That's not that. I just won't. I just will not. And I'm just shocking. When I first, we all first heard about Jordan Peterson was because of those interviews he was doing where he said, I will not participate in compelled speech. The guy's Canadian. I mean, we're the ones that are supposed to be First Amendment, everything, like you say, either your country's the best country or the worst country. But anyways, that was something I thought was interesting, where I never expected it to come in the form of compelled speech. It's very interesting.
And Daniele, being in California right now, what have your experiences currently been, especially, being a teacher and all that, when it comes to where this culture is headed, and whether you see this being something that could lead to a gulagging type of situation if left unchecked?
Well, and that's where I think there's something interesting in what, something that Amanda was saying a little bit ago regarding media. And that's where, to me, is really trippy, because if I spend my day on social media, my perception of the world is so radically different in what I experience in day-to-day life. I mean, yeah, I teach in a bunch of universities in Southern California. You would expect it to be, crazy, like whatever stereotype you would have about that, to the 10th power and more. I pretty much never see it. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does happen here, there. But to me, it's like there are things that are happening. But then it's also a vicious cycle between two polar opposites. It's like, for example, take something batshit crazy, whatever particular batshit crazy thing you think it is that's been taught in a school. Maybe it happens in 1 every 30 schools. But now we shine the spotlight, we talk nonstop about it, becomes an identity issue. So everybody on one side of the political spectrum has to oppose it, everybody on the other side has to defend it, even though they may think it's completely demented. But hey, if those guys are against it, we have to defend it, kind of thing. And now it's gonna be, because it becomes part of the conversation so much, now it shows up in 5 schools, in 10, in 15. But it's to me, it's almost like the people who are sometimes making a profit over finding the new thing to be outraged about every day are, in a way, contributing to the growth of the very things they are criticizing by making them such a big deal, which is not to say that we should ignore stuff, because I get it. It doesn't have to be mainstream everywhere before you take it seriously. You can point to a tendency in a culture and it's going in a direction that you think it's unhealthy, and you may want to call it earlier rather than later. I get that. At the same time, overhyping it makes it way worse than it is in reality, and in a paradoxical kind of way may end up creating the very reality you're criticizing initially. Because, my experience is weird in that regard. You would expect weird, crazy things to happen. I hardly ever see that in real life. Once in a while, a little bit, but my guess is that much of what we see comes primarily from private schools, small liberal arts colleges, where this kind of stuff is hyped to the 10th power. A lot of places that are even just state university, UCs, that kind of stuff. I mean, again, is it there? Sure. Is it as prevalent as we advertise? Not nearly as much. And again, no, maybe it's just my experience. Maybe I'm living in my bubble and it's happening in the next room and I don't realize it. But in my experience, not nearly as much as the stuff we argue about on social media all the time.
No, what he's saying makes total sense, because, of course, why is a normal situation is not going to make the news.
Mm-hmm.
So you have on both sides the outrage machine.
Yep.
And I completely I agree with that, because I see the outrage machine on the right. I certainly see the outrage machine on the left. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say that, but I do see it on both sides. And you're right; there is a huge amount of money to be made in the outrage cycle, and they don't shine a light on anything normal. Mm-hmm. Like anything that's not shocking to someone is not going to make the news. It's the same thing that people have been complaining about the news for. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yep. Yeah.
For a gazillion years. That's not even a political concept. Mm-hmm. It's a media concept. It's just our institutions are partially, the media is one of our institutions, and I believe it is extremely broken. That's what I mean, where I think we really, most people agree on most of these kind of nuanced issues. Mm-hmm. And then we get pushed in this us and them situation, and it is not to our benefit. It's never to our benefit. And I was so hopeful in 2016. I was so so stupidly hopeful in 2016 and 2015 that I was like, oh, well, this will be great because then, Trump will come in and everyone will see that like the new generation of Republicans is nothing like the other ones, and like everyone will get along, and this will all actually, like, I actually thought it would be less divisive afterwards.
Sweet summer child.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wasn't a political consultant then. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, I think what Danielle is saying again, I mean, he's just really, just absolutely on point with that.
But the FBI factor, that still has to be considered, because obviously people who were within that organization, they didn't see things as nuanced as you and Daniele do. They
Not
did
only
pick a
that,
side.
they're like this whole idea that it's just a couple of bad apples and like the rest of them are okay is totally insane. Like they're if it was just, they're like with all these people that say things like, well, it's not the rank and file. Well, I will believe that when I see the rank and file ranking and filing it out the door and all becoming whistleblowers and telling us every single thing that's been going on. Like a few of them have, to their detriment, I don't know what they're going to even do with the rest of their lives, like career-wise. I mean, they're barely getting the kind of protection that whistleblowers historically have gotten in the United States. And I mean, CIA, good luck. You're not, good luck getting a CIA whistleblower. They'll be dead. Yeah. They're like FBI, DOJ, at least we can get some people telling the truth about what's going on. I mean, we've got guys like, of course, I'm going to say, like in Plot Against the President, you've got guys like Kash Patel who were so disgusted. He worked under Obama. He worked under many different presidents. He was not a political figure until he saw how corrupt the DOJ was, and then went to go work for a congressman who would expose this. And like it says in the movie, he said, I want to expose whatever we find. I don't care if it's good for the right, if it's good for the left. I want to expose the whole thing. It turns out what they exposed was Russiagate being a hoax. But like guys like that, I mean, where are they? That's why he's so unique. You're like this one guy we're celebrating because he's the one guy. I mean, like, where is everybody else on this? And that's very frustrating.
Well, where's Nikola Tesla? Where's Thomas Edison? Where's Alan Dulles, who I was mentioning before? That's another weird thing. I mean, I guess it's kind of almost a spiritual question in a way, where when we look back at the 20th century and the 19th century, there's all these great historical names. I mean, like him or hate him, I'm sure Alan Dulles was not a great dude, but the fact that he was somebody who was able to create the CIA and do the kind of things that he was able to do.
He's the one that something that you couldn't control. He's the one that took the CIA out of the chain of command. That actually is, I think you could point to Alan Dulles as the point at which our country went awry.
Yeah. That was a Conan move, though. You got to admit, like, for somebody to be able to figure out a way to wield all that power.
You can have a Conan lifestyle if you live in a roving band of 20 or 30 people. We haven't seen Conan the King yet, by the way. We don't know what kind of a leader Conan would be, because unfortunately Warner Brothers doesn't want Conan the King to be seen. I've read the script. I'm happily would send it to each of you guys.
Schwarzenegger wants to do it, right?
I think Schwarzenegger, the dad, got pushed into talking about it because I have a little bit of a bad habit of I wouldn't say harassing, but communicating with his son Joe Bania on Instagram because I think he would make the most perfect like baby Conan ever, and he'd be like, he looks exactly like Arnold. So I'm constantly going after him when he's not in the gym, and I'm like, why aren't you in the gym? Why aren't you in the gym? I don't see you sword practicing. What is this Dancing with the Stars shit? This is for girly men. What are you doing? And I'm like kind of going at this kid a lot. Like, and he starts responding finally. The poor guy. I should leave this poor child alone. But anyways, if I was to direct Conan the King, that kid would absolutely be in it, and he'd be amazing. He's very charismatic, very good on camera. He works out pretty well. It still needs to be in the gym and be doing sword practice and things like that. But then the dad, I swear, I think did that interview, because there was an interview about Conan the King where he was like, stop asking me about this. I'm not in charge. The reason we can't make that movie is because Warner Brothers won't let it off the shelf. And that is a very real thing. And my dad has about 30 unmade scripts. Okay. Everything from Daniel Boone to Genghis Khan to Conan the King to a really, Dr. Strangelove level funny movie about the real Dr. Strangelove. He has, I could go on forever. Tons and tons of these movies, but they're owned by the studios, and the studios are not exactly owned and run by people who want a lot of John Milius movies out there right now. Maybe this will change and I'll get my hands on one of them and I can do it. I mean, literally 2 days ago, I was with my dad and he was like, why can't you get, try to get Boone made, try to go get Daniel Boone made. And I'm like, Dad, I don't have any magical like powers more than you do. Like, remember all those like days and weeks that you got to just sit and write in an office and smoke cigars and hang out with the Hells Angels and the Special Forces guys and whoever the heck you were hanging out with, and like just like living this life of like, really he got to live, and it's good. It's a good thing that he did. He got to live the life of like a boy with an imagination. He got to write the imagination, the fantasies of all adolescent boys, right? Like, maybe my friends and I are going to conquer this bad, religious leader, and we're going to cut the head off his snake, and we're going to steal this, and then maybe our friends and we're going to live up in the woods, and we're going to combat the Soviets. And it's like, we're going to take their tank, and then we're just going to like fight them with our hunting rifles. Like, everything my dad does is like a fantasy of a certain type of American boy, which is why it's so successful. And he could do that because he could spend his life in that brain, right? He could stay in that mindset. And I tell him, I'm like, the reason you could stay in that mindset is because you were working in the studio system, bro. You were getting paid every single day you were there. The trade-off is that they own everything you wrote while you were there. Like, you don't, he's like, why can't you just take it? Just you go direct it. And I'm like, I don't own it. Neither do you. Like, it would surely you understand this. Like,
what I think would be a great deal? If the Japanese, because I know like he likes Japan a lot, if the Japanese studios could buy the scripts from Warner Brothers, they could make an anime, like animes based on your father's scripts. I think that would be amazing.
There's so many. That's actually been mentioned before. Is doing a what do you call it? A graphic novel based on some of his stuff. Because there's many options. It's just that working with him is not easy. There's just been a lot of, like I said, when I said there was a lot of decisions made in the past that were not exactly the greatest decisions for the future. This is what I'm talking about. Like, some of this stuff is what I'm talking about. Like, the fact that I can't just pick up and take one of these scripts and be, his representative to any. There's plenty of people in Hollywood, by the way, that would still make these movies. It's a little bit overshooting it to say that there truly is no one in Hollywood that would make a John Milius script. Like, of course there is, but it's about getting it out from under the grips of the studios, that they are not like wrong in what they're saying. They're saying, we paid this person X millions of dollars to sit and write this. It didn't happen to get made, but those millions of dollars are still on our books. So if you want this script, you're going to have to pay us for it because we already paid for it. And it's like, that's how the movie industry works. And I studied that, right? That's why when I went to USC, I certainly didn't go to the writing school because, I'm sorry, if you're John Milius's kid, like, why would you go to writing school? Like, you're just not going to win. Like, no. Like, I was a very visually focused person. I was a photographer before. I would study all of the great directors that were more, I would say, visual storytellers. You can't beat my dad at dialogue. So, like I kind of, and also I actually think it's that difference between a female and a masculine way of looking at things. I am just more of a visual person. I was a painter. I was a photographer. I was a cinema, assistant cinematographer for a while. I'm more into visual, and I'm very much more into like working with actors on like a psychological level, as opposed to kind of this more dialogue driven storytelling, which is
funny, by the way, because you have brilliant verbal acuity. And that is something that I noticed. Like, you were able to really quickly pick up on certain things that were said, and I think that is a great quality. No matter like whether you're saying that the dialogue is not your thing, you have amazing verbal acuity and then visual acuity to boot. So you've got the whole package.
Well, my brother would. That was part of the Malice show. I told you there's like one thing my brother would always tell people, which is that I'm one of those kids that didn't go to class, but I got a perfect score on my verbal SATs, but probably a 0 on the math. So worked out. But anyways, so that's kind of the industry reason why we're not seeing Conan the King, even though there's a huge audience for it. It's the studios, and like it or not, I mean, my dad's generation was known for breaking up the studio system, but he was working for the studio system. Like, his office was always at Sony, it was at Warner Brothers, it was at Columbia before it became Sony, I think, when I was a kid. All I know is I didn't visit him in a non-studio office ever.
And now, do you say they don't have the money anymore, or they don't want to do these kind of projects where they would pay millions of dollars for brilliant scripts to be written? Because it seems like right now there's not really that much going on.
I'll tell you exactly why they don't want to do it, because Hollywood has redesigned its business model that any movie that they make has to be successful overseas more so than it has to be successful domestically. And when you have a very heavily dialogue driven script, or a heavily story driven script that isn't like man running from monster, or monster turns into car and there's a fight, like the most basic concepts you can imagine, you can sell that anywhere. You can sell that to all of Asia. You can sell that to all of South America, Central America. You can sell that to every country in the world. And that's what you need. If you're making $200 million movies, which, comes down to being about $100 million in production costs and $100 million in global advertising, that's actually how that usually breaks down. That's oh, great. The other cat screaming. Stop it. We're not playing right now. No, stop. Dude.
Everybody subscribe, by the way. Those who are watching right now and haven't subscribed, I'm using this cat distraction to ask you to subscribe right now. Anyway.
But I'll have to jump in super quick. I have to go on dad duty because my daughter needs to do something at school and I need to take her for a night event. So
I made my point. Please go ahead.
All right, Daniele, apologize. No problem.
I need to run. It was a pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you so much.
Where can we find you, Daniele? History on Fire podcast, and where else?
Yeah, in a rare moment of good decisions, which are rare enough that are notable when they happen, I put together a link tree so that all my links, all the stuff, rather than having to try to say 35 different things, they're all there. So if you manage to figure out how to spell my name, which luckily shows up on the screen, so that helps. And the last name has a lot of L's, but that's Bolelli, link tree. Everything you could possibly want and more than that is there. So from Substack to YouTube channel to History on Fire podcast to all the good stuff.
Excellent. Daniele, thank you so much for coming in. Amanda, would you be able to stick around for a little bit longer? How are you doing?
Yeah, I can give us about another 15 or so. Is that okay?
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Cool.
All right, Daniele, thank you very much, brother. I really appreciate it. And also, guys, take care, Daniele. And also, guys, if you are enjoying the conversation, you can become a patron, patreon.com/breaktherules today. And by doing so, you're going to support the show. And also, there's going to be VIP events that I've been doing, like some of the, Amanda, you're familiar with Dime Square, right? In New York City. Yeah, so I did a show with them recently with Jason, researcher Johnny. We're talking about UFOs, aliens, stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. So if you guys want to be VIPs for other live events that Break the Rules is going to be doing, become a $20 patron today. And also Lev's Lens Substack. I did a Substack recently about Alex Jones, the dissection of Alex Jones, I called it, where I have him like in the frog outfit and there's like this red line going through there, because kind of like what we're doing right now, I want to be able to take things from what's been said by people that are warning about troublesome things ahead and kind of say, okay, what are the things that's not going to take us like several lifetimes to go through? What are some very basic things that you could present, that these are the things that pose the dangers and these are the things that we're going to have to tackle? You were mentioning FBI, CIA interfering with basic parental understandings of what exactly their children are or aren't allowed to see. And that's pretty troublesome for me. I don't know if like right now the parents haven't really been arrested for doing things of that nature, but other creep having to do with like that California law that I was talking about with the divorces and the gender identity, that's not good either.
If you care about art, let's talk about that. I mean, okay, so the fact that I was able to get Plot Against the President on Amazon, iTunes, and YouTube was such a feat that only I could have done that with the amount of sheer will that I had at that time. There's very few people that can do that. There's a problem there. Even after I did that, Amazon changed their rules so that you couldn't put unsolicited documentaries onto Amazon without a prior approval by Amazon, because that movie did so well. It overcame their algorithm. It was on the front page of everybody. When you turned your Amazon on, it was like one of the first movies, if not the first one, during the first few weeks, and certainly during, months actually. So, okay, so that's not a government intrusion. And the fact that there's other movies that I'm involved with, and there's other movies that have been made that have nothing to do with me that have not been able to do that. And yes, there's things like Rumble, but when it comes to reaching an incredibly wide audience, you have to be able to, if you're in the business of movies, you have to be able to reach mom and dad America as they sit on their TV and can click one button, see it, and press play. Like this idea that, okay, well, we can just put everything on a computer screen, it's going to be fine. And then, we can Chromecast it or whatever. Just like, okay, all of that is that's too many steps. And it's going to hurt the industry because it's going to hurt people's ability to make money. Because you can't, I get so many people that'll be like, well, why wasn't Plot Against the President free? And I'm like, well, because it wasn't free to make. So like, I'm not like, the point is to have an industry, right? A competitive industry to Hollywood. And you're not going to have that if you just keep having these sort of like wackier movies that don't go through, let me put some of the burden on the filmmakers that don't go through the clearance and don't go through the legal work that is required for a film to have massive distribution. And at the same time, the distributors are under pressure not to put certain movies out. For example, even though the movie that I made had absolutely nothing to do with January 6th, it was about 2016. I look like I live in a jungle right now. It's like there's
it's all dark green, and you have the Hieronymus Box painting behind you there.
Yeah, and then there's just like these two cats just roaming around. Yeah. I'm never going to hear the end of it on the internet. They're going to be like, anyway, it'd be great if you could sit down. The point is that none of that stuff is government controlled, but all of that leads to a dampening of people making interesting and edgy art. You don't want to be in a situation where the only movies that are getting made are the ones that are okay with the regime. It's not the government, but like the general like Hollywood, big Hollywood, right? Like you don't want I mean, we had an indie revolution for this reason, did
but
we
you don't think there are enough people who feel like you feel right now, and when they see any Hollywood celebrity that's trying to preach to them, they do the complete opposite? At least it seems to me like they're...
It still doesn't get the movies made though. Like it still doesn't. That they might roll their eyes and say, I don't care what Gwyneth Paltrow tells me about anything, and move on from it. Fine, maybe they've lost their power, but Hollywood, this idea that Hollywood only cares about money is not a thing. Like they're so owned by China. They're the first industry that China bought, and I mean that was a trip when I was working at State Department, getting briefed about that. And the example was the 2012 version of Red Dawn versus the original Red Dawn that my dad made, and how they had to change certain things in the 2012 one to make it appealing to China. And I'm like sitting there like getting briefed, and I'm like, I know, like I know I have an opinion about this that's long held. Like it was totally weird. But yeah, like there's a dampening effect on, and this is a shame because, you know, we are finally at a place where the technology of film is so advanced and small and cheap that really we should be having a second indie boom right now. Like, you know, how we had in, you know, like the 1990s when they had studios popping up that were making, you know, A24 and
but people had an attention span back then. That's the problem right now. A lot of these younger Zoomers...
I think they want it. Did you see how well Oppenheimer did just by being a normal movie?
That is a good point. Only thing that I would say is I'm curious about the age range of the people who attended even the Barbie movie in comparison to how much people, especially like younger people, are on TikTok. I'm not even talking right now. I'm talking about like 10 years ago, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I just don't know if the attention span is going to be good enough to get anything into the theaters other than Ass the Movie, which was an Idiocracy by Mike Judge, where people were just staring at an ass that was farting.
Mike Judge was really ahead of his time, I gotta say. He's got some good politics, though, you know. I don't know. I guess I'm optimistic about that. I think that the movie theater experience isn't going anywhere. I just think as long as there's dates and as long as there's the desire to unplug for 2 hours, which I think actually becomes even more valued in this sort of doom scrolling world we live in, I think that the cinema experience is not going anywhere. And I hear that even from the bigwigs, you know, in Hollywood. Like Steven Spielberg is a big proponent of saying that the theater experience isn't going anywhere and can't go anywhere. And that streaming, you know, obviously streaming is great. I love streaming. I mean, streaming saved our movie because we released in the same year as COVID when all the theaters closed. But the theater experience is not... It's not going away. I mean, cinema is designed for that. And people sometimes ask me, they're like, well, why? Why does it matter so much? And I'm like, just the sound alone. And I'm not even talking about a screen that's big enough that fills your entire field of view. I mean, it's an utterly different experience. It's so important as a visual storyteller. The fact that I can make something move from this side of the screen to that side of the screen really fast, an entire audience will go like that. Like that's not possible at any home theater. You can put it on your whole wall.
The only thing that I would say is a counter, and I agree with you that cinema is not going to be dead until until Elon Musk gets the brain chips into our heads, and then we're just going to be living like your father's just going to be living out his fantasy of being the actual Conan the Barbarian, out there in the wilderness, and that is going to be a whole other stage for humanity. That's going to be a brave new world. But the last thing that I want to touch,
is good though. That's the thing, is at the end of the day, I don't think story ever dies. I mean, look, we always feel, I think every era feels like they're living at the end of the world. Do you really think that like Homer thought that he was living at the beginning of culture and Western civilization?
Well, look at Christianity. Like Pope Sylvester thought that the end was coming.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So it's like the story stays. The story of the ability of a good story doesn't lose its power regardless of the medium. I just might that like, if anything, I said I was really black-pilled and I was going to bum everybody out with how dark I think everything is. But that I'm extremely optimistic about, is I think that story at the end of the day will always win.
In the spiritual matter, and this kind of relates to the last thing that I wanted to ask you here, in the spiritual matter, do you see the life that we're living in right now as also being a story? Where, for example, Carl Jung talks about there being these different aeons that people live through, and right now we're going into the age of Aquarius, which is going to be different from the age of Pisces, that was like the time of Jesus, which had its own particular spiritual leanings when it comes to like self-sacrifice and things like that. And now there's supposed to be, according to this interesting dude I had on the show, Meme Analysis, there's going to be a divergence where you're going to have one group of people that's going to go more within. They're going to try and figure out like what exactly is up with all these different religions. What are they trying to tell us? What are the processes that we're going to be experiencing when we die? What is the afterlife? Does reincarnation exist? How does all this work? And then there's going to be another group of people that are just going to be plugged into, I'm sure you're familiar with this term, goon cave. They're going to be plugged into, their goon machine, and they're going to have like this harem of anime girls inside of their heads. And they're just going to be stuck there. They're just going to be, being drained of their life force, and eventually their spirit is going to die because there's not going to be anything that is like the kind of pressure that you talked about when you were hated, nor the kind of pressure that, let's say, our ancestors had to go against in order to grow. If you're not having anything negative, like
that's got to be appealing to anybody who's afraid to fail. Anybody who, and which is a lot of people. I have to remind myself not to be afraid to fail. It's just that I don't really go into this. I don't buy into this ages thing so much, but at the same time, I don't disagree that there are, and I think there have always been two different kinds of people that will always take, even if it's more uncomfortable, the reality fight, versus the people that, and I can think of different people that I've known in my life that I'm like, oh yeah, that one would check out. That person would check out. They would check out at the first opportunity to put the headset on and just be like, nope, I'm living out. I don't care if it's real or not. I'm sitting on a couch and I am living a fantasy that I have in my mind in on my couch.
It's already here. It's already here with social media.
I mean, yeah, for sure. And it's like, but at the same time, there's a reason. This is going to sound crazy, but there's a reason, of course. Like I said, Conan was the most impactful movie on me that my dad made. And then something else that really changed my life, and I talk about a lot on the internet and people think I'm crazy, is Kobe Bryant and his mentality, the Mamba mentality about persevering, about your job on earth to be the best at what you can be every single day of your life, that you owe it to your life. Like you can say to God, to whatever you want to say it to, that you owe it to being alive, to be the best possible version of yourself at every possible moment.
Crom would be pleased by that, by the way. Like that's
there's so many connections. Do not get me started. The snake stuff, and then you get the philosophy, the Mamba mentality, and the Kobe, the Conan philosophy it's like this. It's like
Yeah.
the same thing.
Well, in
And like
Eastern philosophy as well.
my head, I mean, can you imagine
Yeah.
how nuts I am? Anyways, but yeah, so that's like a really big. So that's something that I think about where I'm like, I don't see that in everybody, and I think it's special people that will stick to the fight and embracing what God gave them, which is a life, versus people that will check out. There are already two different kinds of people.
But then here's the final kind of disturbing part of this, which, just so you know about Break the Rules, I usually do have these kind of meetings of the minds where I get people like you and Daniele who do agree on a lot, yet come from very different circles. And one of the people that I've brought in, which was a very different circle from a lot of the other, let's say, more, transhumanists, like I had Gennady Stolyarov II, who's like a member of the Transhumanist Party, and he was... Yes,
God.
he was a nice guy. He's really cool.
Sure.
And he wrote this book called Death is Wrong, so he's against death entirely. But that's like a whole other... We got to get you two on. But anyway, he was on with this very extreme, like the edgiest of the edgy people named Sonny, who was part of this whole Kaliak thing. I don't know if you know Kaliak, Kali, accelerationism. It was this, I guess you could call it a cult or whatever back in the day, but people thought of it, as I did, kind of like as a digital steepy. Or step, I don't know how to step, where different people were able to meet up and kind of exchange information. And we had this guy in like Aryan Cowboy who was talking about all kinds of esoteric things having to do with Shambhala and Agartha, and like the usual stuff that now has become
I like this stuff.
Yeah.
I like to dabble in all of this. But sorry, go ahead.
No, well, here's the big question though. Right now, I think we're at a point, like let's say with Elon Musk, where I'm very happy that X has become a lot less censored. But then I also noticed that certain people, he's not just uncensoring them, but he's also promoting like this one guy. I don't remember his name, but he's like a super duper, like you were talking about Pedro Gonzalez being like an anti-Semite. Here we're talking about somebody who's like a legit 100% anti-Semite to the extent that he wouldn't even come on Break the Rules. So when somebody like Sonny, who like did all these Hitler memes, comes on Break the Rules to debate my transhumanist friend, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. Like I brought the knowledge that I was Jewish to them in their forum, and they were absolutely cool with it. Like I think these were younger people.
There's totally a different level,
Yeah.
and it was hilarious the other day. Like some leftist was like, "So what you're saying is that you can tell the difference between people that are tweeting anti-Semitic memes and actual anti-Semites?" And I just like replied with my one picture that just said yes.
Yeah, like there are people who are in that for the long haul, and he even had a friend of his, which I don't want to go too long of a story.
I don't
but
even
to make,
think that like the ones that like half of the ones that are like pretend in the long haul, like my little Groyper followers, who I do care for them, like my little frogs very well. They just get upset 4 times a year. We're getting onto one of them. But
I'm not talking about little. Just to be clear, the people I'm talking about, they're not little. They're like well educated. Like they've read Evola, they've read like all this kind of stuff. And the thing that I find weird is that why is Elon Musk promoting them out of all the people who he could potentially promote who talk about the same things, like having to do with the ADL and all that? Because I believe in free speech. I believe in people being able to go against these. Yeah, of course. But then why promote those people, like the people who he knows better? Like he knows that these are like legit anti-Semites, and I don't understand that.
So this ADL thing popped up, unfortunately, because I usually stick myself in the middle of these because the anti-Semitism accusation, when used incorrectly, is an absolute disaster for actual anti-Semitism issues, and it drives me freaking insane. And I won't even say. One day I will reveal the T-shirt that I have made that sums up my feelings about this. Today is not that day.
Okay.
But it drives me freaking nuts. Okay, so that's why I have to like, and like some of my more like my older friends or like my more traditional friends, they're like, well, okay, so I don't understand. You just tore the shit out of Pedro Gonzalez, but you told me that this guy over here wasn't so bad. And I was like, yes, I stand by that. I'm completely right. I know this guy. I talked to this guy. I knew both of them. Like, it's a completely different situation. Like, utterly different situation between certain people. You just have to have an eye for the internet. I don't know how to put it. Like, I just have been online since it existed, so I can, you know,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you
Sure.
can read these.
Yeah,
Anyways,
but like go on.
The ADL thing, I'm kind of annoyed that I wasn't more involved in the moment that finally everybody kind of turned against the ADL, because the ADL has been giving Jews a bad name forever. And they've been just a total disaster and no help. I mean, not no help. They have been actively politically terrible for Jews. And I'm annoyed that I wasn't more involved, because I was actually traveling the last 2 weeks. I've been on the road pretty much like the whole time, to see my dad and to visit both of my parents and go to California and Texas and everywhere I've been going. It's been kind of insane. So I've been very off the topic, and I actually don't know which guys you are referring to.
I can tell you later, not even because I don't want to remember now, I just don't remember the guy's name. But let's pretend if it was, in the scenario, if it was somebody like Pedro Gonzalez, let's say, and you found out that this is the guy who Elon Musk was promoting, like, that wouldn't be great.
I would be so annoyed that, like, no, that would be really stupid.
So at least, so at least if you were to buy what I'm selling right now, like, if you were to take my word for it, like who the gentleman was, he was so anti-Semitic that he wouldn't even come to break the rules, because when I found out through a personal acquaintance who used to be on the show that he does not want to come on because I'm Jewish. So that's like the level of person that we're talking about here. And a friend of his who used to come on as well back in the day, he thought that I hated him for some reason, and I never understood why. But he also, like,
they're like, "Oh, do you know how much, like, Jews hate, like, this or that?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know that."
Like, I disagreed with him a lot about his love for authoritarianism, but it's like, dude, this is what the show's about. Like, I don't hate you. I want to speak with you and, like, get to the bottom of what exactly the differences are here and try to figure ourselves out of it. But the last thing that I kind of want to figure out here is I also had Raw Egg Nationalist on the stream, and that was a fun stream. Like, I get where, and I think we're all on the same page here, like, I get where that surf the Kali Yuga energy is coming from. But at the same time, I think that there are people who are within that circle who unironically wouldn't mind there being, like, some fascist dictatorship that'll solve all their problems.
But come on, but, like, okay, I don't know. My sense of humor is rather twisted. But when they had that shirt, though, blood, soil, and grass-fed beef, come on.
Yeah.
That's excellent. That's hilarious.
I think it's about, like, okay, imagine if we were, like, in the Weimar Republic right now, right? And we were sitting in a cafe. And no, we're sitting in a cafe. And we're speaking to all these intellectuals, to, like, people who are going to become, like, the next Mussolini and the next Hitler and whatever, and we're just having a conversation. Back before anything, nobody knows anything at that point. We're all just exchanging ideas. I bet that there are opportunities out there for some people, I'm not saying all, but for some people, to have a positive impact when speaking to some of these people who later on may become some weird fascist leaders, because people, they can LARP.
Part of that would be letting them have fun and make jokes that aren't serious, and not acting like there's a certain something you can never talk about and you can never make jokes about. So I think that letting the steam out is actually important. That's again why the ADL, I think, was such a disaster, and why certain organizations. I mean, I remember when I was in the admin, having to explain to certain individuals who had proposed an anti-Semitism czar that would police the internet and I was like, no. I was like, no, stop.
How are these people so clueless? Like, dude, this is what I don't get. They're their own worst enemy.
I know.
Okay, the best thing I think to be done is, number one, sure, let them have fun, but number two, actually get people who are kind of what I want to do with BTR. Get people who are professionals in their field, whatever, to actually speak with a lot of these people and to like sit down and thoroughly like go through. Okay, you have questions about society, you have questions about what was going on back there in the Middle Ages with like the banking or international finance. Let's have at it. Let's talk about everything. I don't care.
And what I always do is I'm always like, it's I have this weird thing where I always have this conversation with like the Groypers or with whoever about like IQ, for example, where I'm like, but you guys love this conversation. You love the IQ conversation until it gets to this one place. And that would be with the Ashkenazi Jews. And you suddenly get really pissed about that. I don't understand. Do you believe that IQ has anything to do with where you might end up in society or not? And thus, if you believe that it does, you would have to, if you study IQ at all, you would have to say that Ashkenazi Jews have higher IQs than they're overrepresented in the like the curve, if you will. So
in the chess, music, science, everything.
Well, just literally everything. So they're going to end up in leadership positions. Forget even being inventors and come up with new ideas and psychology and this and that, because they'll point to like Karl Marx, or they'll point to like the bad side of it. But you're like, yes, but there's just as many on the good side. And the issue is that they'll actually, what you're looking at is a group of people that tend to rise to the top of whatever they do. And I frequently use the argument of like, if you had a garbage man's association, okay, like forget the international banks, just the Association of New York Garbage Picker-Uppers, the guy that's the president, probably the only Jew in the organization. I'm just saying it's extremely likely. And it's just because they tend to be out of, and I'm not saying all of them. I'm not even saying like I'm not saying myself. I do it as a joke on the internet because it's funny and everybody does it. But like, I'm not saying even my own family or anything about myself or this or that or the other or because that's the race.
Well, they were like rock stars in Cincinnati, from what you were talking about earlier, right? Like.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Don't make me laugh. The Cincinnati one. Remember I said the wrong thing where I was like, instead of Cincinnati Schindler, I said Cincinnati Hitler.
Yeah, they were in charge of the gas.
Oh my God. That show was such a brilliant train wreck that it was just like, oh, it was so great. I love Michael Malice.
He's a real sweetheart. Yeah. I met him at Skangfest back in the day.
Oh yeah. He's been. I mean, so many of those guys, like back from the Red Eye era, from like Fox and stuff like that. But my point is just that it's like, okay, so sure, yeah, I do think it would be important to have conversations like that with people who are potential future leaders, because you don't want them going Pedro style, autistically serious. Like, you want them to understand that it's like fine to joke about and to like, I mean, we joke with each other. It's like, let's all joke with each other. It's the same way that like, you know, people will look back on the 90s as like the height of race relations being fine, because comedians were always joking about each other, and every comedian was always joking about race, every single race, not just like two races, but all the races and like all the religions and all the everything. And everybody was poking fun at everybody. And that's actually how you get along. And that's actually how you like just enjoy one another and not have big problems. That's why I think it's important to like let people have jokes. But at the same time, that's why I also think it's important to go to bat when people are like, oh, like, but you guys are all the ones that are about letting the migrants in the borders. And I'm like, well, then why was the hardest core people in the Trump administration about closing the border a guy named Stephen Miller, who's a Jew, my boss, who was a Catholic, and my coworker, who was another Jew. So you had two Jews, 3 Jews and a Catholic were pretty much the hardest core people you were going to find on immigration in the Trump White House. So tell me why, like, again, you're just going to find these people rising to the top of their situations. Like, that's what happens.
I like using the analogy of Gandalf and Saruman, how you have good wizards and bad wizards, but they both happen to be wizards. And if you grow up in like an urban environment where you go to college, who are you going to be surrounded by? You're going to be surrounded by leftists. And the only jobs, if you go into media, that you're going to have for the most part, guess what? They're going to be all the cathedral leftist bullshit narrative type of jobs, and that's the environment you grow up in. If you grow up somewhere else, like in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you're more like doing like some industry related things there, that's a very different environment, different crowd of people that you grew up with. And I think that's the real thing that people kind of miss from this whole equation.
And a different kind of too.
Yeah, exactly. Like how different a lot of those environments are. And even like with the USSR, like back then, there was this impression that people have of like these, nebbish Jews that, don't want to go to war like the proud Russian soldiers.
Right.
Most of the volunteer... just real quick, like most of the volunteer jobs, not jobs, but volunteer positions during the Second World War, which were super dangerous, were taken up by a lot of these so-called nebbish Jews, where they had to sneak into the front lines there, and that was like the riskiest thing you possibly do. Because a lot of them, I think at that point, maybe it was because like all of the pressure from the pogroms and all of that kind of made somebody who's not afraid of death anymore. And Absolutely. Somebody who is willing to fight for something larger than themselves, while some of the more muscular, macho guys ended up sticking it around, back with the boys there. So I don't know, like it's a weird thing what we're going through right now where I almost feel like just like any other people on the planet Earth, people who are raised in a certain environment where they fear any kind of antagonism from people who they perceive to be anti-Semitic, they would rather not talk about it. They would rather just put their heads down. I don't think we're in an environment right now where we could afford to put our heads down. I think we have to be very honest with what's going on and just like allow people to speak with each other and figure out like what's the next step. How can we address this problem without becoming a dictatorship? Because again, like for me, the thing that I'll be very honest with you, and I think you've been very forthright with me, I really appreciate that. The thing that freaks me out about somebody like Trump, for example, would be not even him, not his decisions that he's made. People think certain things are great, certain things are bad. The thing that concerns me the most is that when you have somebody who does rely on the people as kind of like the tone that's being set for what decisions you're going to make, it really comes down to what is the culture of the people at that point. And I would rather have a more responsible elite that can set a better tone for the people to follow, not in the controlling manner, but in the cultural manner, like elite that are actually cultured.
I think we're past that. I think we're so past that, and the elite that we have are so utterly bad, and they're actually so bad for us. If you want to talk about not good examples of Jews that care about individual countries and nationalism, which I think is actually really important. And that's why I actually think one of the most important things that happened was an Israeli Jew writing the book, The Virtue of Nationalism. And of course, I'm talking about Yoram Hazony, who I think is the leading voice in this. And it had to have been written from an Israeli Jew point of view. Is really where my head is at when we talk about this stuff. I don't fear the people because I don't think that they. I think the voices of the people who are, actually legitimately really anti-Semitic are just so minute compared to like average people. At the end of the day, I'm American before I'm anything else. And that's always going to be how I am. And I mean, of course, I'm Jewish, but I'm American before I'm anything. So I want America to retain itself as a nation, and I want France to retain itself as a nation, and I want Israel to retain itself as a nation, and on down the line. So nationalism is something I think is really actually very, very important. And when you have that, I actually think you don't have situations that get out of control with dictators and this and that. And also, like, I mean, like the Trump versus future fantasy dictator thing, like, I could say this way worse about Biden. Like, I could say way, like, abusive power and abusive. I mean,
well, let's put it this way, just to be devil's advocate real quick. Here's a less of a dictator and more of just a policy type deal. When you have people who, let's face it, if we are all in our closed loops, which all of us are just because we have a limited amount of people that we could talk to on a daily basis, and if people watch certain programs that wouldn't really say anything other than, depending on whichever issue we're talking about here, that wouldn't conform to like the full package here. If you agree on this thing, then you're probably going to have to agree on A, B, and C, because you don't want to lose the viewers, right? Like, for example, I am of a different opinion when it comes to the situation with Russia and Ukraine right now than you are, and I think that's perfectly fine. The way that I want to go about it is actually having, I mean, now it's not, we're not going to have time right now, but in general, having...
Don't get mad at me if the computer dies, because
no problem at all. But the last thing there is that's going to require, maybe with my friend Vlad Davidson and Curtis Yarvin, together, that would be a cool stream. Like, that would require like a longer time to unpack. But when it comes to how that particular issue, for example, is portrayed, you're only going to have it portrayed one way when you're on Tucker Carlson, and other issues kind of fall, into that same thing. So my point here with Trump is that...
I mean, I was pretty early on, maybe because I did the Russiagate movie, and I had to research Ukraine so much, and I had to be... and also because of potentially doing Plot Against the President too, I have to be, I worked at State Department. I was very, very, very aware of what was going on in Ukraine and what the Atlanticists' desires about Ukraine were for so long. We're going to have different opinions on that, because I don't have like memories of like fond memories of like summers in the fjords of Ukraine or something. Like, I don't know if they even have fjords. I'm just making that up. But I don't really have any kind of like attachment to that. I just have the American, like, America first sort of like...
No, I understand. The only thing that I would say is that my perspective also goes back to America. I want, first and foremost, what's best for America. I would say that it would be different than what you're seeing specifically with Ukraine, but that's for another day. My main point, though, is that conversation, it would be of a particular type of viewpoint when you're on Tucker versus when you're on, like, I don't know, CNN or something. And what I fear may happen in the future is, because people take all of the talking points, whether or not they're correct or not correct, they all kind of, they all kind of take them. And mistakes are bound to be made when you're talking about, like, not even dictator level, but when you're just talking about somebody like Trump or somebody else who's a populist making decisions. What I think
the answer there is lessen the power of the mainstream media, which it's already doing to itself. Because I'm able to sit and have a conversation with Daniele, with yourself, where we can say, like, I agree with you on this, this, and this, but not on this, this, and that. And I have this conversation with people every day, where it's like, just because I have X, Y, and Z foreign policy position doesn't mean I have whatever position domestically or this or that. Like I said, like, we've got to get to a place of more individualism, in a sense, where we can just simply actually ask ourselves, what is my position on issue X? Like, I don't know that it is the same as everyone else who agrees with me on issue Y. And I actually think that social media and the individualization of, like, opinion sharing, I think that's actually kind of going in the right direction. I don't think it's going farther away, at least on the right, because the destruction of Fox has basically made it so that, I mean, I and everyone I know, at least, can look at Fox and be like, you know, they can say two things that I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree with that, but I agreed with that 5 years ago. That's boring. And then like they can say 10 things that I'm like, this is the most retarded thing I've ever heard. Like, why are they even going on about this? Doesn't mean that I go over to CNN and I'm any happier. I certainly don't like that. But again, there's just this disgruntledness amongst, I think, the majority of people when it comes to any mainstream media. I think that's why these smaller, more like particular outlets, you know, foreign policy I get from X outlet, domestic policy I get from this outlet. I get my wacky stuff from over here. I might get a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it's actually kind of like democratized itself. And
in a way, like I'd love to see more interactions, let's say, with Tucker and some pro-Ukraine people. Just as a side, like I know that we differ there, but just as far as having a bit of kind of like counter to whatever it is that's been going on in one circle, and then, for example, having some other broadcaster, having somebody who's more isolation-minded, I think that would be good too.
This issue on Iran, for example. I mean, this is one of the countries that was in my portfolio, and it was one of the issues that's a pet issue of mine. And I disagreed with, the Tucker crowd as far as the generals that were on that issue. I disagreed with them off the bat, but once we sat down, there was a couple guys I sat down and had dinner with, and I was like, no, I'm not talking about 5 years into the future. I'm talking about 40 years into the future. And then it's like, okay, then we started to get on the same page, and I was like, imagine a world where there's this power structure. These two structures are keeping each other in check. America doesn't have to be involved. Like, the foreign policy landscape is one where I think most people can really get into some deep conversations about issues and find that they actually agree far more than they disagree. At least if you're not a total neocon who just wants to go to war all the time and waste our best generations. I mean, I don't think that everyone that has a different opinion than I do about certain issues is that. So
no, the only people that I'm going to bring on are those who would see whatever it is, the worst case scenario. Yeah, we're going to try to prevent your cat from doing some neocon bullshit behind our backs. So it's like, we want to avoid the worst case scenario. We want our people to prosper in America, like we want best, peace on earth, whatever. But mainly we do want American industry to prosper. We want there to be a high trust society. That's very important, where you don't feel like when your kids go to school, there's going to be culture clashes, there's going to be various things that don't conform to, let's say, a high level of civilization. Let's put it that way. I think that's one of the things that a lot of the, our migrants found when coming over here, is that they did have to conform to a certain standard of civilization. And I think a lot of them did. And sure, you could say like some of it was like waspization or whatever, but I think a lot of it was more Americanization. I had to learn English, and it was very quick for me. It was less quick for my family, but they still learned English. And one of the things we found... did that same back in the like 20s that they were here. I mean, this was something to read about in their diaries and whatnot. I mean, that's the idea. And unlike Russians that we were living, like in Russia, where they have all this, you're talking about black-pilled. Like, Russians are the most black-pilled people on earth because of all the slavery they had to go through, under the Mongols. So America was like such a breath of fresh air. We're like, why are these people so friendly? Everybody's so nice. And it's like, that's what I really want to preserve. I want to preserve the high trust society where people are nice. And so far, like, I walk around the suburbs where I live in right now, and that's kind of like that. That's kind of like it. Everybody waves and I wave back, and it's that's what I want to keep. And I want to keep same thing that I think any sensible person wants to keep. And that's what we got to work on, regardless of whatever differences. We just have to hash it out. Next stream, I really want to bring in Curtis and Vlad, and they've been with each other talking for a long time. And Vlad, also a fellow J, by the way. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 Jews this time around. And Vlad is also a member, but he's super based. Don't get it twisted. He's like a super based member of the Atlantic Council.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Okay, my computer is going to die. But
okay.
Let's promise to do this again. You may even have to bring me back with some Curtis and company sometime, because that would be really fun, or with some of the, I don't know, some of the friends.
Yes.
But yeah, oh my God, if we get into that. I mean, granted, you know, I've gone to, we know what I've done at the Atlantic Council. I'm not allowed to go anymore. But yeah, I can imagine.
And again, like he hates Hunter Biden. You know, he thinks he's an absolute degenerate. So he's like not one of these, you know, policy wonks, you know, with like the blinders on.
The Atlantic Council thinks I'm an absolute degenerate. So that's okay. But yeah,
we have fun. We have fun here. We have fun on BTR. So guys, if you want to support this podcast, live stream, whatever you want to call it, become a patron right now. Patreon.com/breaktherules. That's the link. I'm going to post it in the chat over here for all of you. And we're going to have MP3s of the episodes after they come out for the $5 patrons. Oh, little kitty cat wants to say hi. And yeah, if you become a patron, you are going to have, for $20 membership, VIP access to a lot of the events that I'm going to be throwing here in New York City, as well as private virtual events, meeting of the minds, whatever you want to call it, where we're going to have the best people being able to connect to each other and figure out where we go from here. So, Amanda, yes?
The best people.
The best people, absolutely. I'm not even going to try to do a Trump impression. You could do one if you want. I don't know. But anyway, Amanda, it was a great pleasure speaking with you and Daniele. Before you go or your computer fries out, is there anywhere... Oh, one thing people were saying in the chat, your nails are the color of my shirt. Is that right? Yeah, that's pretty...
They're kind of like a mermaid aqua. I don't know what I was thinking with that. I was doing like it's the last summer nail color, like kind of like pool. It was the color of like a California pool.
Yeah,
that's what I was going for.
Still feels like summer here in Long Island. But anyway,
sure. It feels like summer here too.
Yeah, but what would you want to anything coming up? Oh, here we go. The computer died. Amanda, don't die on me. I was just about to promote. Oh, anyway, guys. You could see Plot Against the President. You could find Amanda at Twitter or X.com, whatever it's called right now, at Amanda Milius. I'm going to spell it out. It is AMANDAMILIUS. And please follow her on Twitter, Instagram as well, Daniele Bolelli. Please follow me on Twitter as well, at LevPo. LEVPO. Once again, patreon.com/breaktherules. And guys, listen, join my Substack. Enough is enough. I have a great article that I just wrote about Alex Jones. It is guaranteed to be a great time for all of you guys to listen to. Not listen to. You can't listen to audio, right? But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Here is the article dissecting Alex Jones. Here is the thumbnail, close up, with the little frogs there and with all these background characters here. This is Solovyov over here on the side. He is one of Putin's propaganda guys. There's like a sour-looking Vladimir Putin, and Alex Jones, who's like dissected over here in the middle. And it kind of talks about the good points, the bad points, and trying to figure out what we can grasp from this particular individual. But anyway, guys, it's been a great pleasure as always. Next week, break the rules. The week after that, break the rules all the time. I'm going to sleep now, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.